we are, and fight we will. This is a moment in time, I tell them when they ask me, why are you doing it? That I believe anybody who purports to be a leader must be in the business of fighting for the importance of truth and justice in our country. This is a moment in time where anyone who says they can lead must be in the business for fighting for equal opportunity for all people to succeed. And then sometimes when they ask me, why are you running? I just tell them, there's a personal story behind it, which is this. My sister Maya and I, we were raised by a mother who was all of 5 feet tall. But if you had ever met our mother, you would have thought she was 7 feet tall. Right. Yeah, Miss Nancy. And our mother was the kind of parent who, if you ever came home complaining about something, the first thing she'd do is she'd look at you, may have one hand on her hip, and she'd ask, well, so what are you going to do about it? So I decided to run for president of the United States. So there you go. So let's talk for a moment then about the importance of truth and justice in our country. Certainly over the last couple of years, we've all been having a conversation about the importance of truth, mostly in the context of the many untruths that have been spoken. But I'd ask that we also think about the importance of truth in this context, which is, in our country today, there are a lot of people who rightly feel a great sense of distrust about their government, its institutions, and leaders. And the thing about a relationship of trust is that by its very nature, it's a reciprocal relationship. You give and you receive trust. And one of the most important ingredients in trust is truth. But there's a funny thing about truth. Speaking truth can often make people quite uncomfortable. And when you're in the business of speaking often behind a microphone and behind a podium, there's an incentive that when you speak, you'll engage in happy talk. You'll make everyone feel lovely, you'll sprinkle lovely dust all over the room, everyone will applaud, and the job will have been done. Well, speaking truth doesn't always accomplish that goal. But the other thing about speaking truth is this. Yes, people may walk away from that conversation thinking, I didn't particularly like what I had to hear. But they will also walk away from that conversation knowing it was an honest conversation. So I believe this is a moment in time where we must speak truth. And now you all are looking at me, okay, Kamala, what are some of the truths you have in mind? Well, I will share some with you. If Charlottesville did not make it clear, if the Tree of Life Synagogue did not make it clear, racism, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, these issues are real in our country. They are born out of hate which over the last 2 years has received new fuel. And we must all agree that whenever and wherever that hate displays itself, we must collectively stand up and speak out, and we must all agree that whomever is the subject of that hate, they should never be made to fight alone. Let's speak truth. Let's speak truth. America's economy is not working for working people. So how do we know that? Well, in America today, for almost half of our families, they cannot afford a $400 unexpected expense. $400 could be the car breaks down, a hospital bill you didn't see coming. That $400 expense will topple the stability of a family. In America today, in 99% of the counties in our country, if you are a minimum wage worker working full-time, you cannot afford market rate for a one-bedroom apartment. Last year in our country, 12 million people took out a loan of on average $400 from the payday lender at an interest rate of often in excess of 300%. And you know, I find it kind of funny, ADC, when supposed leaders will run around talking about the economy is great. The economy is great, they'll say. And then you'll ask them, well, how so are you measuring this great economy of yours? And they'll point to the stock market. Well, that's fine if you own stocks. Then you look at them, well, how else are you measuring the greatness of this economy of yours? And they'll talk about unemployment numbers. Well, yeah, people are working. They're working 2 or 3 jobs. And in our America, nobody should have to work more than 1 job to have a roof over their head and food on the table. Let's speak truth. Let's speak truth. We are a society that pretends to care about education, but not so much the education of other people's children. So I've been traveling. I have met more teachers than I can tell you who are working 2, sometimes 3 jobs. 94% of the teachers in our public schools come out of their own pocket to help pay for school supplies. Teachers on average in our country make 11% less than similarly educated professionals. And we all know there are only 2 groups of people raising our children. Parents, often with the assistance of grandparents and aunties and uncles, and our teachers. But we are not paying them their value. And you know, this is personal for me. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Frances Wilson, God rest her soul, attended my law school graduation. Yeah, but you know what? Many of us have a similar story, right? Of some teacher along the way who convinced us we were special. We weren't particularly special, but they told us we were, and we believed them, which put us on a path to being under one roof today, talking about who might be the next president of the United States. So I will tell you what I am prepared to do. I am prepared to put in place what will be, in the history of our country, the first federal investment in closing the teacher pay gap. Now, in the state of Alabama, that will be on average $14,500 a year. Now, we all know $14,500 a year, that's a year's worth of mortgage payments. $14,500 a year, that's a year's worth of grocery bills. $14,500 a year represents putting a significant dent in student loan debt, which is one of the greatest barriers to our students coming out and joining a profession for which they have a passion. And to put a fine point on this subject, I strongly believe that you should judge a society based on how it treats its children. And one of the greatest expressions of love that a society can extend toward its children is to invest in their education and, by extension, their teachers. Let's speak true. Let's speak truth. On any given weeknight in America, there are families that sit down for dinner, during which time the parents ask their children, elementary, middle, high school students, "Honey, how was your day today?" To which those children respond, "Wasn't a good day." "Why, sweetheart, what happened?" "Well, today we had to have a drill where we learned about how we should go and hide in a closet in the event that there is a masked shooter roaming the hallways of our school." "Why, Mommy and Daddy, did we have to have that drill?" To which, of course, the response is, because there are supposed leaders in Washington, D.C. who have failed to have the courage to reject a false choice which suggests you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. Supposed leaders who have failed to have the courage to agree. Fine if you want to go hunting, but we need reasonable gun safety laws in this country, including universal background checks and a renewal of the assault weapons ban. And I'm going to tell you something, which you already know. Montgomery, you know this. Gunfire is the leading cause of death of young black men in America. This is not an issue that we can any longer afford to wait on. And you know, when people talk about, well, why hasn't there been any action? Well, look, I'm done on it, because I'm going to tell you, it's not like we're waiting for a tragedy. We've seen the worst of human tragedy. Are we waiting for a good idea? Nope. All the good ideas have been had. What we are waiting on is Congress to have the courage to act. And so I'm going to tell you, when elected, I will give the United States Congress 100 days to pull their act together on this and put a bill on my desk for signature, and if they don't, I am prepared to take executive action to put in place what will be the first national comprehensive plan on background checks, which will require anyone who sells more than 5 guns a year, they got to do background checks. I'm prepared to tell the ATF, you need to take the gun licenses of dealers who fail to follow the law. And you should know, 90% of the guns associated with crime in America are sold by just 5% of the dealers. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the ATF is fine on the A and the T, but they need to do a whole better job on that F. And by executive action, I am prepared to ban the importation of assault weapons from foreign countries into our country. Let's speak truth. Let's speak truth. That at least since 1963, when we had the Equal Pay Act, we've been talking about how women don't get paid the same amount as men for the same work. Let's speak truth that today in America, today in America, women are paid on average 80 cents on the dollar. Black women are paid 61 cents on the dollar. Native American women are paid 58 cents on the dollar. Latinas are paid 53 cents on the dollar for the same work. So here's how it works. What ends up happening is that, well, thank you for President Obama and the first piece of legislation he signed when he took office, the Lilly Ledbetter Act. A woman from right here in this state. Now women have the right to sue. Well, I'm prepared to take it to the next step, which is instead of requiring that woman to prove that she's not being paid the same amount as the guy who's working in the cubicle next to her, I'm prepared to put in place a rule that requires that big corporations prove that they're paying people the same amount, shifting the burden from those women to the corporations, and require that those corporations put a sign on their webpage saying that they are paying people the same amount or indicate if they are not. And in addition, because I believe in enforcement is an important aspect to encouraging good behavior, they will be required, if they are not paying them the same amount, for every 1% differential between what women are paid and men are paid, they will pay a fine of 1% of the previous year's profits. Because we need to encourage good behaviors. And we've been having this conversation for far too long. Let's speak truth. Let's speak truth. America's infrastructure is falling apart, and we have a president who has no plan of action for dealing with it, and we need to get the job done. In Alabama, you know, there is sewage on the streets and in folks' backyard. In the United States, 1 in 9 bridges are structurally deficient. We have children in communities around our country who are drinking toxic water because of a failure to address this issue. On average, the infrastructure of our country is 125 to 150 years old. When I talk about that $400 unexpected expense that can topple the stability of almost half our families, you know how much 4 tires cost? Why do you have to get new tires? Usually it's because those bridges and roads have potholes. These issues are connected. So I'm prepared to put in place what will be the most significant investment in the infrastructure of our country, understanding it is a critical nature and aspect to what we can do to have a good quality of life and fair access to all the opportunities that exist. Let's speak truth. Let's speak truth. Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States. And on this subject, we have a supposed commander-in-chief who prefers to take the word of a Russian president over the word of the American intelligence community. That we have a supposed commander-in-chief who prefers to take the word of a North Korean dictator over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to an American student who was tortured and later died. A commander-in-chief who prefers to take the word of a Saudi prince over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to a journalist who was assassinated, a journalist who had American credentials. We need a new commander-in-chief. Go on and on with the truth. But I'm gonna close them up for now. I gotta leave you wanting some more. I'm gonna close up the truths with this one that I believe, especially now, when there are so many powerful forces that are trying to sow hate and division among us, is a truth that we must not only speak, but is a truth that we must know in our hearts and in our souls. And that truth is this: the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. And we have to know and own that truth. And here's how I think about it. I think about it based on what I call the middle of the night thought. Some people refer to that as the 3 in the morning thought. You know, other people refer to that as the witching hour. You know what I'm talking about, right? When you wake up in the middle of the night with that thought that's been weighing on you. Well, for the vast majority of us, when we wake up thinking that thought, it is never through the lens of the party with which we're registered to vote. It is never through the lens of some simplistic demographic some pollster put us in. And for the vast majority of us, when we wake up thinking that thought, it usually has to do with one of just a very few things. Our personal health, the health of our children or our parents. For so many, can I get a job, keep a job, pay the bills by the end of the month, retire with dignity? For our students, can I pay off those student loans? For so many families, can I help my family member get off their drug or opioid addiction? The vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. And so as we march ADC toward 2020, I say let's hold on to that and own that. Let's not buy what some people are trying to sell when they have us pointing fingers at one another, because I'm not buying that. I'm going to tell you what else I'm not buying, by the way. I'm not buying what even some Democrats are saying, which is that, oh, well, when you travel to the Midwest, you're going to have one kind of conversation. If you go down south, you're going to have another conversation. You know what I'm talking about. If you go to the coast, you're going to have a different conversation. I'm not buying that either. And as we march toward 2020, I would also ask that we remember that one of the greatest strengths that we have as a nation is that by our very nature, we are aspirational.